we're going to talk about self-esteem and the opposite of self-esteem, which is shame, and how the Torah shows us the path to getting over our self-consciousness and feeling great about ourselves. But first, a joke that no one's going to laugh at. There was once a chicken and a cow walking down the street, and they saw a restaurant, and in front of the restaurant there was a sign that said, "Breakfast special, steak and eggs." So the chicken says to the cow, "Hey, cow, we're famous. Look, steak and eggs, that's us." The chicken says, "I make the eggs, and you, cow, you make the steak." And the steak says, "Yeah, but I think it's a little bit different for you and I." And the chicken says, "How so?" The cow, pre-steak cow, which is called a cow. The cow says to the chicken, "Well, chicken, for you, it's a donation. For me, it's a commitment." Okay. So, because, the chicken can give eggs and continue living. Once the cow becomes a steak, it doesn't become a cow again. So it's a pretty big commitment. At any rate, why am I talking about this? There were 15, they're not called ingredients, what are they called? Materials, building materials that you use. Ingredients is if you're baking a cake. When they made the Mishkan, the sanctuary in the desert, there were 15 building materials. Gold and silver and copper and that kind of stuff. But then there were also some more unconventional building materials, like the goat skins. I don't think you get that at Home Depot. Goat skins at Home Depot. And then there was something really, really offbeat called the tahash skins. The tahash skins. And what's a tahash? I can't even translate the word tahash. In fact, there is no legitimate English translation because, I'm going to explain to you why. The tahash, the Gemara in Shabbos tells us, was a many-colored animal. It had multicolors to its coat, vibrant coat, very, very beautiful to behold. It was also huge. It was like a big animal. I think it says it was 30 ames long. It's big. It's like a 3-point shot. So, and it had this gorgeous coat. Oh, it had a single horn. Had a horn. That's why some people translate it as a unicorn. That's not a unicorn. At least not like a horse-like unicorn. They just call it a unicorn because it has one horn, so they're like, oh, unicorn. But for that matter, you could translate it as rhinoceros and be equally as incorrect. By the way, do you know that, like a rhinoceros, my speed is prosperous? And you can decode what that means. There's no way you get that reference. There's no way. You don't? Good. Okay. Okay, I stumped you finally with a reference. Okay. Like a rhinoceros, my speed is prosperous. I don't even know what that meant the first time, let alone as a reference. Okay. The tahash was this many-colored giant animal. Oh, and according to some of our sages, it was a kosher animal. Some say it became kosher at that time. It wasn't always kosher. But at any rate, so imagine this massive kosher animal with this vibrant, gorgeous skin with one horn. And that's what a tachash is. But here's the deal. Here's why there's no valid English translation for that species, is because it only existed for that time. It only existed for that time. So when the English language came along a couple thousand years after Moses was in the desert with the Israelites, there was no tachash anymore to have a word for it. So at that point, all these other languages just made up words for it. So people do say unicorn, but it's totally arbitrary. It's not a unicorn. Now, what may horrify you if you're not connecting the dots, and normally if this weren't the point of this class, I would just leave this. Sometimes as a rabbi you say things that are dangerous and you're terrified people are going to connect the dots, and you just are so relieved when you speak quickly enough that you can move on to the next subject without anyone asking. But this actually is the main point of the class, or it's a preliminary to the main point of the class. So I'm going to say it. If you put two and two together and you realize that the Jews in the wilderness used this tachash hide as part of the decor of the sanctuary, and I told you that it only existed for that time and then not afterwards, then basically it kind of implies, and this is not something people like to hear nowadays, that they were basically hunted into extinction. So they were used for this and then they disappeared. That was it. When I moved into my new house, I mean a couple years ago already, but I found some ivory, and whatchamacallit, I asked the former owner, like, do you want it? He's like, I don't know, I don't even know where it came from. No, you do whatever you want with it. So I called what's it called, what are those, pawn shop, and the guy was like, dude, don't bring your ivory in here. I don't need that kind of heat. And I found out it's illegal to buy and sell ivory unless you have really, really clear documentation that it's old ivory. But if you don't have clear documentation, nobody wants to touch it. Why? Because they were hunting the elephants into extinction because people wanted the ivory. So apparently in the desert, the Jews hunted the tahash into extinction, and yeah, so that's the elephant in the room. No pun intended. That's the tachash in the room. I bought my friend an elephant for his birthday. He told me thank you. I said, don't mention it. Don't mention it. Don't mention the elephant in the room. Okay, at any rate, we'll edit in a laugh track afterwards. Okay. Yeah. So the tahash was hunted into extinction, apparently. What's the deal with that? Now, also, since I brought it up, you should understand that Jewish law is exceedingly careful about respecting all life, including animal life. We would never waste the life of a single animal, let alone of an entire species. There's a story that's told about the Baal Shem Tov. Before the Baal Shem Tov was revealed as the leader of the Hasidic movement, he was a hidden tzaddik, a tzaddik nister, and he had various different occupations. One of them, he worked as a ritual slaughterer, as a shochet. At any rate, there was a story that one time a Jew sent his non-Jewish attendant to bring a chicken to the Baal Shem Tov to slaughter, and the non-Jewish attendant came back to the Jewish employer holding the chicken very much alive. So the Jew asked the non-Jew, I told you to bring this chicken to the shochet to slaughter the chicken, and you bring it home alive. Why is it alive? So the non-Jew said, the new slaughterer is no good. Oh, right. The Baal Shem Tov had been the slaughterer in that town, and then he left his post. He moved on. He was always traveling. So a new slaughterer came and replaced him. So now the non-Jew comes back to the employer, sent him and said, no way, I'm not letting the new guy slaughter the chicken. So the Jew said, why not? He said, well, the old guy, Yisrolik, that's how he referred to the Baal Shem Tov. He called him Yisrolik. The Baal Shem Tov was a down-to-earth guy, so they called him Yisrolik. So the non-Jew tells the Jewish employer, he says, well, I can't let this new guy slaughter the chicken. The old guy, Yisrolik, he was totally different. So how was he different? I'm really butchering this story, no pun intended. But at any rate, slaughtering it, butchering it. Okay. The non-Jew actually went to the guy, the new slaughterer, and there's a thing, you have to pour water on the knife before you shecht. So he's like, give me the chicken back. I'm not going to let you shecht this chicken. So the Jewish slaughterer says to the non-Jew, like, what do you don't know Jewish laws of slaughter. Why? He says, no, I know what you're doing is not good. He's like, but that's what it says in halacha. You got to pour water on the knife before you shecht. It makes it smoother, so it's more painless for the animal. And so I'm pouring water on the knife. And the non-Jew said, no, but you're doing it wrong. The old guy, Yisrolik, meaning the Baal Shem Tov, when he would make the knife wet, he would wet it with his tears. He would look at the chicken that he had to slaughter, and he would start crying that he has to take the life of the chicken, and he would cry so much, the tears would go on the knife, and only when the knife was completely wet with his tears, then he would slaughter. You're not doing that. You're not crying at all. Give me the chicken back. At any rate, the point is, obviously, we don't take lightly animal life. So there really is something here to discuss. Like, why was there this weird species that essentially was completely used up only for this project and ceased to exist? Okay. And we are going to talk about self-esteem and shame. And shame and self-esteem. Remember I said that there's no adequate translation of this word, tachash, in English or in any other language? What I want to share with you is that even in Aramaic, classical Aramaic, there's no adequate translation. There's an entire translation of the Bible which is considered canonical in its authority. It's called the Targum Onkelos, and it was composed by a Roman convert to Judaism 2,000 years ago. And Onkelos's Aramaic translation of the Bible appears in most chumashim, in most books of the Hebrew Bible. It appears side by side in the margins, albeit in the margins, but side by side with the original Hebrew text. That's how official and authoritative it is considered. And the way that it translates this word is it makes up a word. It makes up a word, because there is no Aramaic word for it. Because again, by the time people spoke Aramaic to us is an ancient language, but it's not as ancient as the biblical time. So by the time people were speaking Aramaic, there was no tachash anymore. They were all gone. And so Onkelos had to make up an Aramaic word for the tachash. In fact, Rashi refers to it. I'm just looking here, Exodus 25:5, Parsha, Sefer Shmois, Parshas Terumah, our parsha, Perek Chof Hey, Pasuk Hey, on the word tachashim, which is the plural for tachash. So it says, Min chaya, this is Rashi I'm reading from, Rashi's commentary. Min chaya, it's a species of animal. V'loi hoysa ela l'sha, it only existed at that time. V'harbe gvonim hayala, it had many colors. Lekach, therefore, miturgum, it's translated as sasgoina. Samach gimel vav nun aleph. Sasgoina. Sasgoina is not a real translation. It's a description in Aramaic of the defining feature of the tachash. He explains what sasgoina is. Shesas, sus means it rejoiced, umispaer, and it was proud, bigvonin shalai, in its colors. Gavonin are colors. So sasgoina. Sus, it rejoiced with what? The gavonin, with its colors. Sasgoina is sus gavonin. It rejoiced in its colors. It's not a real translation. It's just using Aramaic words to describe something that was sort of a hallmark of this species. It rejoiced in its colors. Okay. So what does it mean now? We're getting a little bit closer.
Isn't sas with shin?
Okay, very good, doctor. You're correct. So sasgoina, the Aramaic, is with two samach, gimel, vav, nun, aleph. Sus is with two sins. So sin is sus. But very often, very good. In Aramaic, a lot of letters are changed when they're changed from Hebrew to Aramaic. So phonetically, it's the same thing. So 100%. Although even in Hebrew itself, sometimes a sin will be used interchangeably with a samach. For instance, on Hashaina Rabbah, some of the samach lines will be a sin. Because it could be used interchangeably, because they're phonetically interchangeable. But excellent question. Okay, at any rate, we're getting closer to the clue here of what this has to do with self-esteem and with self-love and the opposite of shame and the opposite of self-consciousness. Because here we have this animal, sasgoina, shesas bigavonin shalai. In fact, not only it was happy, but Rashi says, Shesas u'mispa'er. Mispa'er means it was proud. It was happy and proud of its colors. Okay, so at any rate, how can I be happy and proud of my, I don't know if it's colors, but whatever my features are? The sasgoina, the tachash, was happy and proud of its qualities. How can I be happy and proud of my quality? All of us have different qualities, right? So here's the deal. Remember that horrific thing that we mentioned, how the sasgoina, the tachash, was hunted into extinction? Okay. So I'm not telling you to do this at home. I'm just telling you a historical fact. That's what happened. And now that it happened, let me tell you what we can learn from it. What is the source of shame? I'm going to define shame as the instinctive guilt that we feel when we misappropriate God's gifts. The first instance of shame that we know of, as recorded in the Torah, was immediately after the Chet Eitz Hadas, eating from the tree of knowledge, and Adam and Eve instantly were ashamed of their nakedness. They were naked before. Why all of a sudden did it have these shameful implications? So what happened is they gained knowledge. What kind of knowledge? Knowledge, they gained the life hack that you could use these body parts for personal ulterior motives. They had no clue before. The Rebbe once said that before the sin of it's a sin of eating from the tree of knowledge, Adam and Eve would be no more self-conscious of their genitals than someone is of the arm upon which he wraps tefillin. In other words, it's just a body part that you use for a mitzvah. Why would anyone be embarrassed of that? What happened when they ate from the tree of knowledge is all of a sudden their eyes were opened and they were aware that in addition to its God-given purpose, you could use it for other purposes. And even if you don't use it for other purposes, just the awareness that it could be misappropriated causes shame. I just did a fundraiser last week and I tried to raise a lot of money. I did raise a lot of money, Baruch Hashem. It wasn't the goal that I set, but we raised a bunch of money for Soul Words. And you can still give, by the way, it's still open. I want to tell you the biggest psychological blockage to fundraising is self-consciousness. Because when you're not confident, it's repellent. People are like, why do you want money? You feel funny about taking money. I feel even funnier about giving it to you. And really the key in fundraising is when you feel guilty that you don't deserve the money, that you may not spend the money well, that shows and people run. Even if you don't say those words, they can feel it, they can smell it. But when you realize that the money will do well, it will be used properly when you have it, then you become shameless. Shameless isn't the right word because it sounds like you should have shame, but you don't. You become shame-free. That's a better word. Because you realize, I'm not going to misappropriate these funds. I'm actually going to use these funds for the purpose they were created. And then you're confident and you can ask for money, and people actually want to give you money, and just like you feel confident about it, they feel confident about it, everybody's happy, and everyone gets to do a mitzvah. But the point I'm bringing out is, where does the shame come from? The shame comes from the fear of misappropriating God's gifts. If I think God gave me money, and I know that money is supposed to be used to make the world a holier place, but I also am thinking, well, maybe, I'll go buy some candy. That self-consciousness is shame. And similarly with anything that you have. If you have something, whether it's a talent, maybe you're good at doing something, or maybe it's a resource that you have, something, you have a big house, or you have a nice car, or whatever it is, or maybe it's a physical attribute. Maybe you have a wonderful physical attribute that is considered aesthetically very desirable. Even something like that, there's a way of experiencing shame with it and being shame-free with it. What's the difference if you're a human being if you're descended from Adam and Eve. The difference is when that thing in your life is only being used for the purpose that it was designed for, meaning if it's in the world, then it has a God-given purpose. If you're using it only for the purpose that God gave it, there's no shame involved. It's like before the sin of the tree of knowledge. But if there's in the back of your mind this thought that, well, yeah, I know God gave me this talent, this resource, this ability, this potential, this opportunity, this whatever, in order to glorify Him. But yeah, technically on the side, I could get a little bit of personal gain out of it as well. So that awareness itself is what creates the shame. As opposed to knowing that any gift I have is being used to glorify God, then it's the opposite of shame. There's pride. And then you can go out and you can be awesome at things. You can even draw attention for being awesome at things and get compliments about it. And there's none of that awkward self-consciousness. It's like, yeah, sure, keep complimenting me. You're not complimenting me. You're complimenting the maker who designed this wonderful thing and who's getting maximum usage out of it. So that's really what it comes down to, is that when you think about the things that are gifts that you have in your life, whatever they are. We all have gifts. Even people with problems, we all have problems, but we all have gifts. We all have blessings. Think about the things that you're good at or you're known for, whether it's a skill or a talent. A skill is something more that you developed, a talent something more you were born with, but either way, whether it's something that you own. Maybe you have a really cool cottage on the lake upstate. I don't know, whatever it is. Think about if these things, or maybe it's a physical feature. Think about these things and think about whether they're a source of self-consciousness or a source of healthy self-esteem. And if you think about each one of those, you'll probably realize that and it's not binary, it's not black and white, it's not all or nothing, but the degree to which any of these gifts, we experience them as a source of self-esteem, or the degree to which, conversely, we experience them as a source of shame and self-consciousness, is going to directly be based on how well we are using that gift only to glorify God. So if you have that cool cottage upstate on the lake, and you're using it for foolishness or things that you don't want to exactly write home about, things that are, that you're not so proud of, then yeah, of course it's embarrassing. Or it doesn't even have to be so grub. It doesn't have to be that coarse. It doesn't have to be like you're using it to do crazy stuff. It could just be you're using it in a way that's not very mindful. It's not uplifting. It's just sort of you're wasting your time there. So yeah, it would be a source of shame, and that's why people ask you, oh, how much did you pay for that cottage? Oh, no, really, it was a short sale or whatever. Somebody gave it to me. I don't know. I don't even know what it's worth. Meanwhile, I go on Zillow and say, that guy has a $5 million cottage upstate, and my house isn't even worth that. Okay, so, but if you're using it for cool stuff, like to host a Soul Words community Shabbaton, let's say, there's probably a guy out there with a $10 million lake house upstate, and you want to stop feeling shameful about it? You should host the Soul Words Shabbaton. And if that's the kind of stuff you're using it for, then what's the shame in it? It's beautiful. A related idea. There's a concept of ayin hara. Ayin hara, people give it all types of weird explanations that are tantamount to lahavdil, to voodoo. Let me explain to you what actual ayin hara is. Ayin hara is actually the residual externalized effects of your own shame and self-consciousness. Because it's not having something nice and somebody noticing it and then them coveting it and wanting it that hurts you. Why would that hurt you? So that's their aveda, that's their sin, that they're coveting your stuff. What it is when you yourself know that you feel self-conscious about this thing, and you don't really know if you deserve it, and you're not sure if you're using it the way that God intended it to be used. And that toxicity comes back, and then it becomes what we call ayin hara, evil eye, and it causes problems. Okay, let me explain to you the clearest illustration of this distinction. There was a sage from the era of the Talmud named Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan was physically beautiful. The Gemara says, if you want to get a picture of Rabbi Yochanan's beauty, it said, take a bunch of pomegranate seeds and place them in a silver goblet that was just pulled from the silversmith's fire, and place it in a window during the golden hour, and put rose petals around the lip. And that image will give you a glimpse, a glimmer of the beauty of Rabbi Yochanan. But he was much more beautiful than that. I like that. That's poetry there. So Rabbi Yochanan used to sit in front of the women's mikveh. Now, if someone today would sit in front of the women's mikveh, it would be a different story. Don't do that. But Rabbi Yochanan would do it. He was a tzaddik. Obviously, his intentions were totally pure. He wasn't doing it for any lascivious reasons. But somebody asked him. They knew he wasn't doing it for anything, perverse, God forbid. But they were like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "Well, whatever a woman sees when she comes out of the mikveh, it makes an impression on her brain and it affects her children. So I want the women to see me, and then they'll go home and conceive children who are beautiful like me." So one of his colleagues told him, "You got to cut that out." Again, not because they suspected of anything, inappropriate. God forbid. This is Rabbi Yochanan. He was a tzaddik, but they told him, they warned him, you are risking an ayin hara, an evil eye. You're going to bring evil eye mojo on you. You got to stop that. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "Well, I'm not too concerned about that because I am from, I think, the tribe of Ephraim." Because there's Ephraim and there's Menashe, but I believe he was from Ephraim, who are the children of Yosef, the biblical Joseph. And Joseph was blessed by his father Jacob, v'yidgu l'raiv. The sons of Joseph, or Ephraim and Menashe, were blessed, v'yidgu l'raiv, which means to multiply like fish. V'yidgu is from the word dog, it means to multiply like fish. And Rashi explains, multiplying like fish doesn't just mean quantitatively, it means qualitatively as well. It means just like the fish is swimming underwater and he's protected from the evil eye, then so too the descendants of Joseph should be able to multiply, and it shouldn't draw any evil eye. So that's the story in the Talmud. Well, the Lubavitcher Rebbe asks a question, says, okay, that's a great story, but the story doesn't make sense because Rabbi Yochanan was saying that he's fish-like in the fact that he goes under the radar. He's a descendant of Joseph, and they go under the radar. They don't draw any evil eye because they're, sort of incognito. But in the story, he was being public. Like his actions were directly against that. And if you say, well, maybe because he was a descendant of Joseph, it means no one would notice him. They walk by him like an invisible man. But then the story doesn't make sense because the whole point was that the women should see him. Right? You following? So the story doesn't make sense. So the Rebbe redefines what v'yidgu l'raiv means. He says the fish are immune from the ayin hara, not because they're hidden under the water and you can't see them. They're immune from ayin hara because the signature of a fish is that it's always connected to its life source. In fact, I spoke about shechita earlier, about ritual slaughter. There is no ritual slaughter of a fish. According to halacha, the minute a fish is taken out of the water, it's already considered slaughtered. Because a fish needs to be in the water to live. Therefore, a fish represents an entity that is totally attached to its source of life. The fish cannot leave its source of life. We have the illusion that we are ontologically independent. We exist. Okay, maybe God made us at the beginning and we depend on him for a few things here and there. We send him our Amazon shopping list. But, basically we exist and we're good. And some of our existence we even have improved on our own. And it's such a joke because we're completely dependent on Hashem. Just like a fish can't come out of the water, we cannot come out of, so to speak, our attachment to God. And in the moment that we do, we lose our entire existence. So a fish represents the awareness that you cannot leave your source of life. And that, the Rebbe says, is why they're immune to the ayin hara. Because the minute you realize that it's all Hashem, it's not me. If I have a gift, whether it's like Rabbi Yochanan, who is physically beautiful, or I have a cool lake house upstate, or I'm good at doing this, I'm good at dancing, I'm not, but I'm a good dancer, or tap dancing or something, I'm not good at that. But whatever it is that God gifted you with, it's not yours, so what are you so self-conscious about? Golda Meir said, you don't have to be that humble, you're not so great. But I would say it like this. You don't have to be humble because it's not you that's so great. The greatness is God's, and you're getting to use it. And once you realize that, then there's no self-consciousness involved at all. And then you can go out and do things that are cool, and everyone can see you doing that, and there's no ayin hara because there's no shame. Okay, so what does it have to do with sas goyna? The one who is shesasu mispar bigvonin shalai, that he rejoiced and was proud of his colors. Here's the deal. I told you, this species of animal existed at one time. He was hunted into extinction. They were used exclusively for one purpose, for the Mishkan, for the sanctuary in the temple. You know, there's a medrash that says that the world doesn't deserve gold. Gold was only created in order to be used for the temple, to build the temple in Jerusalem. But here's the thing. Gold throughout history has been used for a lot of other stuff as well. And I'm not even talking about idolatry like the golden calf. I'm saying just neutral stuff that's not profane, but it's not holy either. Like, there's gold in your computer, I think, for the motherboard to attach to the circuitry. There's a little bit of gold in there. Or a gold filling. Or gold is used for a lot of stuff. But gold really is only really supposed to be used for the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. So then, here's the deal. Gold and most other materials in the world, they have a purpose that they were supposed to be used for, and yet how often are they used for that purpose? Now, let's personalize this, and let's make this about ourselves. We possess gold. I'm saying figuratively. We have different gifts. We have different resources, different stuff that we're good at. And it was all given to us exclusively to glorify God. But, let's be honest, how often are we using it for that purpose? Even if it's 99.9% of the time and then 0.1% we misappropriate it, there's still going to be that trace of shame. That there's something in my life that really was made only to glorify God, and I'm getting sort of personal benefit from it, and you can justify it all you want, but you can tell me, Rabbi, this whole class is offensive because you're implying that people aren't allowed to enjoy life a little bit. Go ahead and enjoy it. See if it works. I'm telling you, it doesn't work, because when you go and you try to misappropriate God's gift and use it for selfish motives, we always end up feeling funny about it. And you can self-medicate yourself as much as you want to feel as numb as you need to not feel that guilt. But the guilt is there, and it's there for a reason. It's because intuitively we know if we have anything cool, if we're able to do anything cool, it's only there to glorify God. And to the extent that we're doing that exclusively, then we feel proud and we feel totally a lack of self-consciousness, and we don't even mind people seeing us using our talents and our resources because it's all God's. But the minute we start siphoning off a little bit of personal payoff, that's where the shame comes in, and that's where we're like, oh, don't talk about it so much. It's like, do you want me to notice or you don't want me to notice? And I don't even, when I'm trying to pull personal satisfaction from the gifts that God gave me, I myself don't even know the answer to that question. Like, do you want us to notice or you don't want us to notice? Like, you're flaunting it, but you're ashamed of it. And the answer is, yeah, I know, because the whole thing is weird. When you're using it for selfish motives, the whole thing is weird. But when you're using it to serve God, then it's clean, it's pure, there's no neurosis attached to it. There's just pride and joy. That's what it is, pride and joy, like the sas goyna. So why did the sas goyna so successfully have this joy and pride and joy in its colors? Why didn't it have self-consciousness? Why is it the emblem, the very paragon of a lack of self-consciousness? You know why? Because precisely of that shocking thing I said, that it was hunted into extinction. It was never misappropriated. They were all used just for the holy sanctuary in the desert, and that's it. Not like gold. Gold has shame. Gold has been used for things other than the temple. The tachash was used exclusively for God's dwelling place in this world, and therefore it is proud of its colors, and it's happy about its colors. And that is a lesson for all of us, that anything you have in your life, if you want to be able to be proud of it, if you want to be able to feature it, and be able to take a compliment graciously when people notice it and they remark, oh, that's such a nice this, a nice that, or you do this well, you do that well. You know how to achieve that? Is through being a good accountant and just being scrupulous about using all of these things for the right reason, for the purpose that they were intended to be used for the glorification of God. Just like our friend, the tachash, was able to do that. That's the lesson. Yeah. Okay. Anyway. Anything else that
I think in the Gemara it says Rav and Shmuel talking in a cemetery, and I think one asked the other and said, why are all these people here? And I think one of them answered, 99.9% of the people died from Mayan horror.
Yeah. Einhorn is a real thing. It's just not the way that people present it. Like, why should somebody else, being petty, be able to hurt me? I didn't do anything wrong. But the way that Rebbe explains it, it's my projected shame. Yeah. Which means it's avoidable as well. And it's not avoidable in the way that people normally think, like, hide your stuff, don't let them know about it. It's avoidable by using it for good stuff. And the guy out there has that lake house, that cool lake. Yeah, give me a call. Yeah.
What if you feel like you're using your gift in the right way, but other people don't see it that way?
Don't worry about them. It only comes down to how you feel about it. At the end of the day, your self-consciousness is the clearest barometer. If you're using a talent and you don't feel shame about it, it's probably a good indication that you're using it well. And if other people make comments, it won't hurt you spiritually, and it shouldn't hurt you emotionally. It shouldn't. You got to work on it. But maybe after hearing this whole explanation, it'll help you to not care so much about what other people say. As long as you know in your heart of hearts you're good with your motives, and you can tell your Maker that you're using your talents only to glorify Him, then you should feel good. No guilt. Good? Okay.